When the rookie cop dragged the trembling teenager into the courtroom that morning, everyone thought it would be another routine sentencing, until the defense attorney walked in and realized the accused was her own son. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above the packed courtroom, the kind of hum that filled the silence between whispers and judgment. Outside, rain drizzled down the courthouse steps, streaking the windows with thin silver lines. Inside, the air felt thick with tension. Reporters filled the back rows, their notepads ready. At the front, Judge Martha Keller adjusted her glasses and glanced down at the docket. Case number 4821, the State of Illinois versus Marcus Lane, she read. At the defense table, the young man stood awkwardly, wrists bound in cuffs, eyes fixed on the floor. 19 years old, slim build, gray hoodie that still bore the faint smell of last night's rain. His name was Marcus Lane, accused of armed robbery and assaulting a police officer. Across the aisle, the prosecutor, Daniel Rourke, looked like he had already won. He leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth curved in quiet confidence. To him, this was open and shut. The evidence was solid. The arrest was clean. The bailiff turned toward the courtroom door. "Defense counsel?" he called out. A moment later, the doors opened, and a woman in a navy suit stepped inside. Her presence drew every gaze in the room. She moved with purpose, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her dark hair was tied back, her jawline firm. "Apologies for the delay, Your Honor," she said. "Traffic from the West End." Judge Keller nodded, slightly impatient. "Ms. Lane, your client is waiting." At the mention of her last name, the prosecutor frowned slightly, then glanced at the defendant. Lane, the same name. The woman-y defense attorney Rebecca Lane turned toward the table and froze. For half a second, her composure cracked. Her face paled, eyes widening as she saw who stood there in cuffs. The courtroom blurred. The sound faded because standing before her wasn't just a client. It was her son. Marcus didn't look up. He couldn't. The prosecutor noticed the hesitation. "Something wrong, counselor?" Rebecca's throat tightened, but she swallowed it down. "No," she said softly. "Nothing at all." Judge Keller looked between them, a faint crease forming on her forehead. "Ms. Lane, are you prepared to proceed?" Rebecca's fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her papers. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. But nothing about this was normal. Rourke rose smoothly from his chair, holding up a folder. "Your Honor, the state intends to prove that the defendant, Marcus Lane, entered a convenience store on Ashbury Avenue at approximately 9:47 p.m. last night, brandished a firearm, and demanded cash from the register. When Officer Blake responded to the silent alarm, the defendant attempted to flee, resisting arrest and causing injury to the officer. The suspect was apprehended 2 blocks away. The weapon was recovered." He closed the folder with a click. "We believe the evidence is clear." Rebecca's heart pounded in her chest. She forced herself to breathe, to separate the mother from the lawyer. She needed to think, to fight. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steadier now, "the defense intends to challenge the validity of that arrest and the so-called weapon." Judge Keller nodded. "Proceed," Rourke smirked. "By all means." Rebecca stepped closer to the defense table. "Mr. Rourke claims the weapon was recovered." "That's correct. A weapon was found, but not in my client's possession. It was found in a dumpster 3 blocks from the arrest site." Rourke's smirk didn't fade. "And yet, the serial number matches the one from the store's surveillance footage." Rebecca turned to the jury. "And yet," she echoed softly, "the fingerprints on that gun don't match my client's." That made a few heads turn. Even Judge Keller shifted in her seat. Rourke frowned. "Those prints were partials, smudged by rainwater." "Exactly," Rebecca said, "which makes them inadmissible without confirmation. You're presenting half-truths to imply guilt. You can't have it both ways." The gallery murmured. Marcus finally looked up, his eyes glassy. There was pain there and confusion. He hadn't seen his mother in months. They had fought about his friends, his choices, his future. He never imagined their next meeting would be like this. Rourke cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Your Honor, this line of argument doesn't change the fact that the suspect was identified on video, entering the store." Rebecca's eyes flashed. "About that video, may I see Exhibit A, please?" The bailiff handed her a manila envelope. She slid out the still image. It showed a figure in a hoodie entering the store, face partially obscured. She held it up. "You claim this is my client?" Rourke nodded. "Then you won't mind if we zoom in on this timestamp. 9:47:03 p.m., she said. "Because at that exact moment, my client's phone was recorded on a city traffic camera at Elm and 5th, 2 miles away." The prosecutor blinked. "That's impossible." Rebecca slid a printed photo onto the evidence table. "Not impossible. Logged by the city's plate recognition system. Marcus's friend's car. The one he borrowed that night was photographed waiting at a red light." Rourke hesitated. "That could have been anyone driving." "Except," Rebecca said, "the timestamp also shows my client's digital payment to a nearby gas station. 1 minute later. Are we really suggesting someone stole his face, his car, and his credit card at the same time?" A ripple of murmurs passed through the courtroom. Judge Keller leaned forward. "Mr. Rourke?" The prosecutor looked uneasy. "We will need to verify that timestamp." "Do that," Keller said curtly. Rebecca turned back to Marcus, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you know about this footage?" Marcus shook his head. "No, I didn't know anything." "Then someone set you up," she murmured. Rourke shuffled his notes. Regardless of the timestamp, the officer reported a chase that ended with the suspect, the defendant, resisting arrest. Rebecca looked up sharply. "Officer Blake, yes, the same officer who's currently under investigation for excessive force in 2 other arrests?" The prosecutor's jaw tightened. "Objection irrelevant." "Overruled," Keller said. "Proceed." Rebecca's tone sharpened. "So, the state's star witness, the one who claims my client attacked him, has a record of violence, and conveniently, his body cam was malfunctioning that night?" Rourke's voice rose. "Your Honor, this is—" "Uncomfortable?" Rebecca interrupted. "That's what truth often is." The gallery stirred again. Marcus watched his mother, stunned. He had never seen her like this. Sharp, relentless, unstoppable. Rourke tried to pivot. Even if the arresting officer's record is questionable, the defendant matches the physical description from the store clerk. Rebecca crossed her arms. "Tall, male, wearing a gray hoodie. That's half the young men in Chicago, counselor. Tell me, did the clerk ever identify my client in a lineup?" Rourke hesitated. "She wasn't able to make a definitive ID." Rebecca tilted her head. "So to summarize, we have a blurry video, smudged fingerprints, a malfunctioning body cam, and no positive eyewitness. That's your airtight case?" Judge Keller's pen stopped moving. The prosecutor exhaled slowly. "We also have motive. The defendant has a prior record for petty theft." Rebecca froze. Her stomach twisted. Rourke smiled faintly. "Or should I say he would have, if someone hadn't pulled strings to seal his juvenile file." Rebecca's pulse spiked. He knew. He knew she had pulled those strings years ago, after Marcus had been caught shoplifting at 14, trying to steal food for himself, and his mother during a winter she could barely pay rent. Her voice trembled just slightly. "That has no bearing here." "On the contrary," Rourke said, "it shows a pattern." "Or," she countered, "it shows a broken system that never gave a struggling kid a chance." The room went silent. Judge Keller's gaze softened, just slightly. Rebecca steadied herself. "Your Honor, the defense moves to subpoena the store's full security footage, not just the cropped clip the prosecution provided. I believe the full video will show the suspect removing his hood and reveal he's not my client." Rourke frowned. "We've reviewed all footage." "No," Rebecca said. "You reviewed what the responding officer gave you. I have a contact in the department's tech division. The full archive was never uploaded to evidence." Judge Keller tapped her gavel lightly. "Mr. Rourke, if that's true—" "I'll verify immediately," he muttered. Minutes later, the court clerk returned with a USB drive. The tension was electric. The lights dimmed slightly as the video began to play on the courtroom screen. The clerk scrolled past the familiar clip, the one where the figure's hood concealed his face, and let it roll 10 seconds further. Then it happened. The suspect lowered his hood, looking directly into the camera before grabbing the cash. He wasn't Marcus Lane. He was someone else entirely, older, with a scar along his cheek. A gasp rippled through the room. Rourke's shoulders slumped. Judge Keller stared at the screen, then at Marcus. "Mr. Rourke," she said quietly. The prosecutor's voice was thin. "The state withdraws its charges." Rebecca's knees almost gave out. She gripped the table for balance. Judge Keller exhaled slowly. "Case dismissed." The gavel hit wood, sharp, final. Marcus blinked as if waking from a nightmare. The cuffs came off. He turned toward his mother, eyes glassy with disbelief. She smiled weakly. "Told you, kid. Always trust the facts." He didn't answer, just stepped forward and hugged her. So tight she could hardly breathe. Reporters outside the courthouse swarmed the steps as they emerged. Cameras flashed, voices overlapped. "Ms. Lane, did you know the defendant personally? How did you find the missing footage? Was this police misconduct?" Rebecca ignored them. She led Marcus through the chaos, rain still falling softly on the courthouse steps. Halfway down, Marcus stopped. "Mom, why didn't you tell them?" "Tell them what?" she asked. "That I was your son." She looked at him, then at the reporters, the flashing lights, the courthouse that had nearly buried him. "Because," she said softly, "this wasn't about me. It was about the truth." He nodded slowly. "What happens now?" Rebecca glanced up at the gray sky. "Now? We fix what's broken." Weeks passed. The story spread. Public defender clears innocent teen. Exposes prosecutorial negligence. People whispered about it in law schools, courtrooms, and online forums. But for Rebecca, it wasn't about the fame. It was about a question she couldn't shake. How many others never got that chance? One evening, she sat across from Marcus at their small kitchen table. He was reading a brochure, one she'd left there deliberately. "Law school?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "You've got the mind for it." He looked at her, uncertain. "You really think I could?" She reached over, squeezed his hand. "You already did." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Guess justice runs in the family." Outside, the city lights flickered on. One by one, reflections of something fragile but persistent. And for the first time in a long while, Rebecca Lane allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the system could change, but only if people like them kept fighting. Because justice wasn't a gift. It was a battle. And tonight, they'd won one small part of it.